It works! Hello, my name is Trent and I'm the Weft Wright. Welcome to my tiny fiber studio. I have a very exciting video for you today. Probably the most excited I've been since I fixed the shed issue on my David 3 loom. This is a problem that I've been thinking about for a few years now, and it involves the tension brake system on my loom. I have a David 3 by Louet, but this would work on a lot of different types of looms. Any loom really that has a tension brake, you could probably figure out a way to make this work. I actually quite like the design of the tension brake on the David 3 loom, and when I was upgrading my vintage counterbalance loom, I decided to model the braking system on the braking system of the David. It works very well. That vintage loom is only about 20 inches wide, and I can easily reach down and operate the handle of the brake. The issue came with my David 3 being 110 centimeters wide. It's the widest one offered by Louet. And suddenly I had to reach much further to operate the handle of the tension brake. And then at the same time, reach with my left hand to turn the cloth beam to advance the warp. This wasn't an issue at first, but I've started having more lower back issues, and this reaching, pulling, twisting motion has become really painful. There's also the issue of tension consistency. One of the things that happens, it seems, no matter how gently you raise the handle on the brake, there's a sudden release of tension from the warp, and it's very hard to predict and control how much warp will be released. I found this an issue because sometimes I would accidentally have to advance the warp a little further than what I really wanted, which is a major issue when your loom has a shuttle race like the David 3, because you can only bring the beater bar so far forward before it hits the breast beam. So I wanted to find a way to mitigate this problem and prevent me having to get up and wind the warp back onto the warp beam. I found the perfect solution, and that is adding a handbrake system to the warp advanced lever. This may seem complicated. It is a cable brake system, but it's actually really easy to install. However, trigger warning, you have to put 2 screws into your loom. Other than that, nothing is permanently attached, and the factory brake that the loom comes with remains fully operational. You don't have to take it out or alter it in any way. First, let's talk about the materials you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need the brake handle itself. This needs to have a 1-inch or 25 millimeter diameter mounting system. I have learned the hard way that if you try to use a 7/8 inch mounting system that are common on bicycle handbrakes, it will not work. And no matter how hard you try to open up that 7/8 of an inch to make it fit, it will end in disaster. So I found what was most effective is to use a motorcycle handle brake, which works extremely well. I bought mine on Amazon for $15.88. Everything else I was able to purchase locally, though you could of course order these items online as well. You will need a set of brake cables. I bought mine at Walmart for $9.96. You will need an 1.5-inch corner bracket. I also bought at Walmart for $2.48, and a 1/16 inch cable ferrule, which I got at Lowe's Home Improvement for $1.98. You will also need a pair of pliers with wire cutters, and a screw gun or drill with a Phillips head bit. So for around $30, you can install this easy-to-use device that has really improved my productivity and the ergonomics of my loom. I also used a few other products just for neatness and to make the loom look a little bit better, but these are optional. I will, however, mention them at the end of the video. So let's dig in and get the device installed. Afterwards, I'll show you it in action. First, let's take a look at the handle itself and install the cable inside the handle. This area needs to be twisted all the way as tight as it will go, and then back off of it 2 complete rotations. Then we want to make sure those slots are facing upwards. Next, insert your brake cable into the handle portion and run it through those 2 slots. Then we're going to tighten the smaller of the 2 nuts and make sure that the cable is flush against the handle. Next, we're going to install the handle itself onto the cloth advance handle. We simply push it on and tighten it down with an Allen wrench. It's always a pain to figure out which Allen wrench fits, especially since they aren't labeled on this particular set of Allen wrenches or Allen keys. This part is a little bit fiddly because you're working so close to the frame of the loom. But essentially we just want to snug it down as tight as we can so that the handle won't rotate. This is much easier if you have smaller hands. Next, you want to make sure the cable is running like this, behind the beater bar and in front of the upright support. Next, we'll screw on the 1.5-inch bracket. This should be done so that the top of the bracket is about 6.5 inches from the seam on the upright. It's time to mark the cable housing to trim it to the right length. For the David 3 loom, it was about 30 inches, but you want to mark it for your loom. Just be sure that the cable is all the way against the brake handle before you do this so that you have an accurate measurement. Because it's hard to mark on the black plastic of the cable housing, I like to use a piece of masking tape. You want to be sure that the bend in the cable is not too severe. Next, we need to cut the cable housing. Pull out the wire from the cable housing far enough to where you know you're not going to cut the cable. You will need most of the length of the cable. Then I'm going to use a standard pair of wire cutter pliers. You could use a special tool that is meant for cutting cables, but I didn't want to add any extra cost to the project. So what I'm going to do is take my pliers and squeeze the end of the cable housing in the opposite direction to how I cut it so that it's round once again. Then we simply feed the cable back into the housing. This can be a little bit challenging. Just work at it slowly, and eventually you will once again have the cable housing all the way flush up against the handle. Next, we want to add the ferrule stop that came with your brakes. Put it on to the end of the cable housing after you've fed the cable through it. Feed the cable through the angle bracket and pull down quite firmly. This will set the ferrule into the cable housing. You don't need to crimp it. At this point, make sure that the hook on your spring is facing forward. Next, we'll add the ferrule to the cable. Put the ferrule on the cable and raise it past the level of the spring. Then put the other end of the cable through the ferrule. This creates a loop. You want this loop to be snug up against the hook of the spring, but not so snug that it's actually lifting the spring. This is a good time to mention that you should have your brake set at the tension that you want for whatever types of warps you're using. You can see your manual about how to adjust the brake tension. Then I'm going to use the pliers to crimp the ferrule onto the cable. And then I also use the wire cutter portions to crimp a little more precisely in a few places. Next, we'll go back to the brake handle itself and unscrew the nut, which puts tension on the brake cable housing. Then we'll tighten up the small nut to make sure that we have the perfect tension. At this point, you may want to neaten up the brake cable. I'm using an adhesive cable holder by 3M. The Loom looks really neat. To finish tidying up, take a piece of black electrical tape and wrap it around the cable where you would like to trim it. Then take your wire cutters and cut off the excess cable. This prevents the cut-off cable from fraying. I later added a thimble to my cable. You can do this as an option, but it's not necessary, as Louet doesn't use thimbles on their cables either. But if you would like to, I'll add a link in my Amazon list. So this is how it works. When you pull on the handle, it raises the spring and allows the warp to advance. Here's the mechanism in action. Pull on the handle and ratchet the claw forward. When you reach the place you want to stop, let go of the handle and pull again to add tension. Well, there you have it. This may be a problem you didn't realize you were having or didn't think there was any solution to, but now that I've made this modification, I will never go back. It is so easy to use. I realize that some of you may have some concerns about the hand strength required to operate this new braking system. I myself have joint issues and don't have particularly strong hands, though they are large hands. I had no issue operating this at all. You have to remember that this is designed to be a motorcycle brake. It's designed to literally stop a speeding motorcycle. So the mechanical force used is maximized to its greatest. Though it should be noted that when you are crimping the ferrule onto the wire, that does require a good bit of hand strength. It wasn't difficult for me, but if you have arthritis, joint issues, or weakness in your hands, you may want to ask someone to help you with that part. Another note, if you follow my directions, it is very easy to lift the wire loop off of the spring and disconnect the brake entirely, which makes winding on a lot easier. In the description below, I have put a list of all the materials I used, plus an Amazon shopping list link. You may want to purchase things in Amazon if you don't have access to these stores or if you are unable to go shopping in person. Though remember, you probably will spend a little bit more money because for the small hardware items, you have to buy in greater quantity. As always, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe to my channel. Until next time, get warped and keep weaving.